Hello, everyone.
One second.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So today I'm really
What?
excited to. Yeah. Hi. Hi, Annie. Hi, Sito. So today I'm really excited to talk to someone. The reason why, because it's like I have been drawing since my childhood, but my my drawings never, even though I love comics, my drawings never became into books actually, because there was, we don't know, we have to showcase our comics, and there was a lot of factors. We don't know that it's easy to do a comic, how to find a publisher, how to present it to a reader, basically how to reach to a reader. So that's when I learned about Indie Comics Fest in 2018, and it came to Kochi also. I remember distinctly that my uncle sent me the poster for Indie Comics Fest Delhi, and he asked me to go there. So I was like, okay, I will see to it. But then I missed the Delhi one. But when it came to Kochi, I quickly jumped into the opportunity just to visit. And it was like, this magical place where everybody came with their very personal works, and they were finding an audience. And that inspired me to start making comics in 2019. So in a way that, my comic journey would have started without Indie Comics Fest. So today I'm really excited to talk to somebody who was the co-founders of Indie Comics Fest, Aniceto Pereira. He is very closely associated with the comic publishing group, Studio Ekonte as well. There was many things to talk to him. So welcome, Sito.
Sorry,
So
I've not done an interview for like ages. This is like the first time in ages.
that's okay.
Excuse me
It's
and forgive me
yeah,
for everything.
yeah.
Yeah,
Apart from the formal intro, everything is just very conversation based so
no,
far in the
I like
call.
formal intros. It's like, yeah.
It's good. Yes. So, Seto, could you please let us know, like, how did this love for comics start? Maybe we can start from the beginning. And how did you end up into this world of comics, indie comics specifically?
So my dad used to have a lending library in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
which is where it started. He was an active reader, but his reading was like restricted to comics. That's it. Um, no novels. So I grew up entirely with basically like his lending library where I would get books from, and he would buy books for the house. Between the two of them, that's basically where I started reading. I went to the boarding for 5 years, between 1990 and 1995. At that time in the boarding, it was like being cut off from comics. So I would read it when I came back. But slowly, someone donated an entire collection of Amachita Katha. Johann Freitas's mother donated an entire collection of Amachita Katha to school. So that was the first time I read Amachita Katha formally. Like in Bombay, it was available. We saw it as Tinkle, but I never read anything outside of Tinkle. I never read any of the Indian epics, this thing, because there were just so many books to read. So and my father focused on collecting Tinkle, not any other books. But in school, I got exposed to Amachita Katha. I graduated. I came back. Um, Back then, there were still lending libraries, but there weren't that many comics. I think when we went off the gold standard, they stopped importing comics for a bit in 1991. So I basically had comics at home, but a lot of them were all pre 1991. And I still remember those stacks. And then one by one, they left my house over the years, gave them away. I never really collected anything and kept it permanently. Like now, I
Okay.
have a lot of books.
Mm.
But back then they were just in flow because you outgrew the stuff you were reading. Like there wasn't. I was reading a lot of other things as well. So I collected those. Old things moved off. Um, yeah. Then I basically in 2005 I was in Chennai and I found Landmark.
Okay.
Um, and basically when I found Landmark, uh, it was damn interesting because prior to that, for the last 4 years, I had been buying books from the States.
Okay.
Um, in the US back then, websites were basically hobby websites. The web was basically a hobby space. And since I
Mm.
love comics,
Mm.
I was using the web actively from 2001. I was using it as a space to buy comics.
Okay.
And back then they had something called media mail. So you could take a sack, fill it with books. £1 of would cost you $1 to ship to India. And you had a limit of £66 per sack.
Oh.
So I would basically fill entire sacks, pay by card, and ship it to India.
Oh.
And that was like the routine. I started using eBay in 2002. Like literally 2001, I was using the internet to shop for comics. 2002, I was using eBay. And until I went to Landmark and I saw the books there, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get comics in India. This is the only fix I have where I can actually find something that I really want to read. But then two things kind of also happened because prior to that, I was reading a lot of stuff outside my purview. Like I was reading mostly independent comics. I had almost no Marvel and DC, and I still don't have Marvel and DC. No fault to Marvel and DC, but basically, I found a lot of other things that were interesting. So I started buying them. I started buying from Landmark. Landmark became like my major place to go to get books. So I used to save a lot of money and buy every month, like something or the other from Landmark. There were series where I didn't even realize they were in print, and I would get them. Like a perfectly good example is the Sandman series. I was in college in Bombay. Anurag Kashyap came for a class, and at the end of the class, he's like, they asked him one of the guys asked him, what are your hobbies? So he's like, I read like comics and graphic novels. So I asked him, what are you reading right now? And he said, the Sandman series. And I was like, series? What? How is it a series? Like, I have one book with me from 1989, 90. Like, I had a book from when I was 10 years old, the first volume. And I thought the series ended there. Like, oh, if he meets death, he frees death, and it's over. And then he's like, no, there's a series, and you can go to what do you call my guy at Bandra. There was a what do you call import like a bookstore that imported books. It was called Lotus.
Okay.
And he gave me the guy at Lotus's contact and said, you can go talk to him. He'll import the rest of the series for you. So I was like, this is great. What is this? And this is 2004, before I found Landmark. So now I was like, first I'm importing it from the States, now I'm importing it from Lotus. Literally, I spoke to a friend of mine the next day, and he had read the Sandman series. And he's like, dude, let's go. I'll buy it for you. You pay me later. Because he was so impacted by the book. He was like,
he wanted somebody to talk to
to make that decision for him, I think, because I was like, I'm not going to say no to this. Like, just, come on, let's go. So he went there. He actually had the first two volumes, and he ordered the rest for me. So he had the second and third volume, and he ordered the rest for me. I didn't buy a first volume. I still remember because I had my original. I just compared notes. So I was like, can I just check and see that these are the same? So they were the same. So I was like, yeah, just give me the rest. So I bought the whole series, took it home, I read it in one shot, and like everyone who reads Neil Gaiman always basically falls in love with it. The metafiction aspect, a lot of the stuff is stuff I was reading at the time, and a lot of stuff he introduced me to. So comics have always been like a gateway to other books. I'm not going to say literature because literature also kind of condemns what you call like genre writing, right? And truthfully, comics introduced me to a lot of genre writing, which to me is literature. There's no like exception. But basically, it was like a gateway to other books. It wasn't that I was reading comics and exclusively digging comics. I was reading everything. Like if there was an interesting author, I was like digging him up through the books. If there was something in philosophy, I would go and look it up. Back then, we didn't have Wikipedia, so I had to actually read source material, not the commentary on the source material. It was like, yeah, you have to read the original. It was also introduction to music, because as everyone knows, a lot of music like the Talking Heads, Bell and Sebastian, they were like influential, like in some aspects of Bob Dylan. They're all influential in some aspects of comic creation. They mentioned, they quoted, lyrics are thrown around. But it introduced me to a lot of different things. So comics were like a gateway to other things. Yeah, and that is basically where the picking up started. Like I was buying books regularly, picking things up regularly, and then reached a point where now I was looking for a community, which was very interesting because when I was in Landmark for that first trip there, I was visiting every day, and I met a guy called Jay Zaveri.
Okay.
He introduced me to basically the Mumbai comic group, which is a bunch of guys on Yahoo group,
Mm.
and like they're all Marvel and DC fans, but it's like, yeah, I mean, some of them are still my closest friends.
Mm.
You know,
Okay. Yeah.
back in the day, like I didn't care who I bonded with, so it was fine. Like I was also fairly like
Mm.
into whatever the Marvel and DC storyline of the day was.
Mm.
And although I wasn't up to date because all my Marvel and DC reading is really like from the 80s and 70s,
Mm.
those books that I grew up with. But it was like, yeah, I like this.
Mm.
You also like this, and you may not like this, but I was okay. You know what? Let's just read everything.
Mm.
But the encouragement I got from them was the main thing because a lot of them were into other things other than Marvel and DC. So
Mm.
they went to a lot of independent books, and I was like, yeah, this is great. So we had a very supportive culture for a very long time. The group is kind of defunct now,
Okay.
but a lot of people in the group still basically have large collections. They've got kids. They're
Mm.
raising their kids with the books.
Mm.
Um, so that is that Mumbai comic group has survived in like and grown in like a different way.
Mm.
That was 2005, 2005. Just as soon as I went to Landmark, I met them and got introduced, came back to Bombay, and I basically continued to hang out with them. But I met Bharat, who is my business partner. We
Mm.
own a company called Studio Ekonte.
Mm.
It's in LLP. Um, I met Bharat in 2006 or 7. 6, 7, one of the 2 years. It was
Mm.
either late 2006, early 2007.
Mm.
I met him online. I'd never seen him from Adam before, but he ran a forum online. And back then, forums were big. So he basically ran a forum online, which
Mm.
was called Comics India.
Okay.
And he had an idea that was fairly radical because back then, um, I mean, like he was thinking about this for a while, and that the idea was very radical. It was that why don't we self-publish?
Mm.
Okay, like just let's publish comics. And back then, there was a company called Poti.com, and it
Okay.
still exists,
It still
and they
exists.
still are the main sponsors
So.
for Indie Comix Fest. They give us money every year for Indie Comix Fest.
Mm.
So back then, there was a company called Poti.com. There is a company called Poti.com still. Um, and Poti basically was self-publishing. So that means if you give them a file,
Mm.
they would basically print it for you according to the demand. So every month there would be a certain number of copies that would be printed and sent out.
Mm.
Okay. So Bharat thought, we're not losing anything. Why don't we make basically what do you call a comic?
Mm.
Um, and now he and Kailash Iyer, okay. Kailash used to be basically heavily involved with comics, like till very recently because of lockdown,
Mm.
and he's had a baby. But he's still there in the backdrop. He still keeps in touch. He's still listening. But Kailash and Bharat decided collectively that they would edit what do you call a series that would be called just Comics India, followed by a theme.
Mm.
So they would declare a theme. People would just make material for like a month or two,
Mm.
send the material across.
Mm.
They would put it all together in a book,
Oh.
and that book will be available through Poti.com. That means basically you could go to Poti.com, click on it. I think it's still there. It's still available on Poti.com. Like you
Mm.
can still print on demand some of those books. You
Mm.
just basically print, you pay for a copy, and the copy comes straight to you. Um,
Oh.
so back then they published 7 volumes in like
Mm.
quick, actually quick succession because I think they were averaging like 4 months to 5 months per volume, including announcing that this thing, collating everything, putting it all together,
Mm.
um, and what do you call it, arranging for Poti to start shipping it. Like so, Poti would do everything. They would do the logistics, they would do the printing. The book was a little expensive for the weight and size,
Mm.
but back then it was a steal, considering what you call
Mm.
how much we had to get it out. It was a steal.
Mm.
The profit division was supposed to be basically between the number of creators, but the amounts which were there was very nominal.
Mm.
It was like $20 or something max.
Okay.
You'd get because I don't think the book sold more than a few hundred copies
Okay.
um, on average.
Mm.
Um, the readership for independent comics in India are always going to be low
Mm.
because basically um, it's a reader thing. And it's a very, what do you call, personal thing where someone likes something, they'll pursue it, they'll
Correct.
pursue the next part, they'll pursue the next part. It's a readership thing, just like how you a fan of a novel. But I still remember seeing one of the books back then, and I was damn happy because it was the first time I was seeing work, original work in print.
Mm.
And now this is important because I was reading a lot of black and white independent comics. Okay, I still have like tons of stuff. I had basically bought Tomine, I had bought Bone, I had bought um, Ed Brubaker had a bunch of comics which were there, which used to release single volumes. I had gotten those. eBay was like a blessing because it allowed me to connect with a lot of people who were selling independent comics
Correct.
cheap.
Mm.
So basically, back then acquiring that made me think, oh my God, there's an active independent comic culture back then.
Mm.
And now I was like saying to myself, we actually have the same thing here.
Mm.
Like you're seeing it. So River Stories also basically suddenly came out online on Comics India. There was a copy of River Stories.
Oh.
It was a scan of a had sent to Bharat.
Mm.
So Orchid sent a copy to Bharat. Bharat scanned it, put it out for everyone to see because there was no physical copy of River Stories.
Correct.
In 2004, we all heard of River Stories
Mm.
because, 2004, yeah, 2005. I'll tell you when also, March 2005.
Mm.
We all heard of River Stories because Sarnath Banerjee had released the book Corridor, right?
Corridor. Yeah. Corridor.
Corridor.
Yes.
And Corridor, yeah, he launched it in Bombay. So his launch was at the Oxford bookstore in town. I was getting back from work when I saw this thing, and I was like, "Oh my God, let me go in." So I walked in. It was 7:30, and he had all his art lined up on what do you call the walls of the
Mm.
inner space that was there. And he was sitting there, so I started chatting with him. And I only had certain comics to contextualize what I was seeing because back then Sannath had basically
Mm.
published like the first graphic novel. But he's the one who told me about Arjun Sen. And he
Mm.
told me basically about River Stories. I filed that away from memory. And 2 years later now, in 2007, when I joined the Comics India Forum, Bharat has got the book.
Mm.
What do you call it? Published it. He also knew Sannath. And published as in kept a scan online so you could see what it was. And Orchard Story was very, very refreshing to see back then.
Mm.
Unusual theme. Nobody is basically this thing talking about it. It addresses like um, it's a very intimate story. It
Mm.
still is. Nothing has changed. Um, and it's shocking to see basically someone doing this because you're like, I didn't know this was possible. So now you have all these parallels happening where
Mm.
in like just 2 3 years, like the possibility for comics in India for me went from like I will never see people doing independent comics, but it's also because I didn't realize the potential like in India. Like a lot of us didn't realize the potential. And the Comics India, those 7 volumes, really speaks to everyone who came through, who
Mm.
did a comic, whether even some of them just did genre comics. So if the theme was basically XYZ, they found a reason to do like a superhero comic, and we didn't care.
Mm.
You just do the comic, okay, because it was fun, it was deconstructive, it was entertaining. Someone did something in that vein, and like there's a pointed pride, like especially for Bharat and what do you call Kailash. For me, basically, I think they basically laid all the groundwork.
Mm.
Um, because now you have basically this idea that oh, we've done something like this, so what's next?
Mm.
And the next thing that happened was Comic Con. So
Mm.
I think Arjun Gain, the writer,
Mm.
um, who now basically has some fiction books on the market. He's also got one or two comics. But back then, I don't think he had written anything. So, but he was um, keen to start a Comic Con. So he ran the first Comic Con in Bombay,
Mm.
like the first in India, in Bombay,
Mm.
at the World Trade Center. There were like 10 stalls, I think, or 10, 12 stalls.
Mm.
I went, it was great fun.
Mm.
I met a bunch of people. Jazel had basically is one of the like stalwarts of Comic Con. Back then, he had a Beast Legion comic series. The first 4 volumes, I think, were available. He
Mm.
had been publishing on his own. No one had seen his book for years. But here he was, and he had these 4 books, and I was like, shit, this is great. Like, excuse me. I basically bought it. And then we met other people there also. the first Comic Con was really a comic festival, like, and then of course it got taken over, or not taken over. I don't know if you say taken over. It got basically like into a proper events thing that happened where
Yeah.
it got formalized, I would say, which would be a better word. And the second one and the third one also were quite, what do you call, powerful in terms of the amount of books available. It's slowly sort of slid from being like a place where you would go for books, to being mostly merch, and that was kind of depressing, like really depressing, because my last Comic Fest was 2017. My last Comic Con was 2017 in Bombay, and I just want to help Bharat out because Hatchet was doing a piece on him and was profiling him with their book, with his book at their stall. So I just went to interview him at Comic Con. But there were barely any books, and I mean, for some people, it's a big event. It's very important because they sell a lot of books there.
Correct.
But for the bulk of people, it wasn't. And I mean, and sincerely, Comic Con is still basically a very viable thing for a lot of creators to basically release and what do you call a big book, because you get such a huge audience filing through, right? But the first Comic Con was like literally like, I think, the purest. Like it was basically like really pure. There was like just comic creators, no one else, no cosplay and all the other stuff. No, no, what do you call, slide on cosplay. Like it's great. Belongs in Comic Con. It's part of that whole. It's part of the whole ethos. But basically, it was kind of like, yeah, comics, great. And that was basically like it. There was all this thing coalescing. So I also joined. I had two friends. They had a third partner, and they had a comic library in Bombay, Leaping Windows. We were there for the second, I think, Comic Con. We basically came, set up for this thing, showed people what books were there. And their library right now has like my old collection, because basically I joined them as a partner, and as part of my partnership with them, I gave them my entire independent comic collection prior to 2011. So because they had a lot of Marvel and DC, but for me, I sincerely thought back then people need to see more independent comics. So yeah, and they have a huge manga collection. A small bit of that is mine, but most of my contribution to them was basically American independent comics, American, European independent comics, self-published comics in particular. And that's basically 2010, 2011, where basically Leaping Windows was doing well. People are reading back then. There was a Comic Con which had started in 2009, I think, was the first Comic Con in 2010. So now you've got this whole timeline where, yeah, now you've got a comics movement of sorts in India where people are self-publishing. And the interesting thing is, going back to Comics India, is everybody I remember from the first 7 volumes, because there were only 7 volumes, is almost still active today. Like they're either doing comics full time, or they're basically involved in the periphery, making their own independent comics, and you see them at, what do you call, ICF, right? They're there. Like they were publishing back then through the magazine, and they're still publishing today. Like that's the amazing thing. Like it's like almost what 15 years later, they're still around. We've got a few of them for for our own magazine, Verite. And yeah, we've used their services and said like, dude, you guys got basically a book.
So when did Verite actually start? Verite.
Yeah. So Verite started in a strange place. Bharat and I started an animation studio because we wanted to do animation. So the company Studio Ekonte is an animation studio.
Okay.
So it started in 2014. We registered it. Our goal was very specific. We wanted to do animation for film. Myself. So we started animation studio. The first project was Kim. Then didn't work out. We moved on to a project on Rudyard Kipling's life in India between the age of 17 and 23. That also didn't work out. Then we moved on now to Bapu's life in animation. So Bapu Gandhi's life is basically interesting to us. But Bapu is also essential to like ICF in a way, because I always host events on what do you call January 30th, his death day, and October, what do you call it, 2nd, his birthday. For me, I host a lot of events. I also do play board games. So I still host board game events on these days. So like Indian Independence Day, which is August 15th, Republic Day, Bapu's death anniversary and his birth anniversary are very important to me. Like it's not accidental. Like it's all planned. We like those days because like for us it is something pivotal, magical about them in India. And those are the days I like to celebrate the stuff, the hobby stuff, right? Because and like the first Indie Comix Fest is on October 2nd. It's 2017. It's because of what that day represents to us as Indians that I decided to do it on that day. It wasn't that, oh, we got it that date. No, we looked for that date several months in advance. Who had a place we could rent? And we were like, yes, thank you very much. Let's take it.
This
Yeah,
was
it's also a day
this was in
everyone
Mumbai, right?
celebrates.
2017
Huh?
Mumbai. 2017
Yeah,
Mumbai.
so, yeah, so 2017 Mumbai, we actually started planning that fest out in Jan that year. Um, and it was very strange because nothing happened for 5 months. We were just thinking of what to call it, right? Like naming is such a powerful thing. If you don't name something, you can't like do anything with it. So the name took 5 months, but once the name was sorted, and I still have an email which I was looking at the other day by accident. I was cleaning out emails and I saved that email because it was just a message from Bharat where he's like talking about the name. We were talking about the name. We were trying for like some zany name or something. Like back then, there was a bit of the advertising ethos that was there, which is we had to think of marketing and all. And honestly, that was a bad thing because that really like once we moved past that marketing advertising phase of the naming, the name just came out naturally. So we were thinking of zany names like how someone has Yahoo and Google, right? We think of something zany like that. But once we moved past that, it was like, yeah, Indie Comics Fest, ICF, just great, no problem. Is the email available? Yeah, let's take the email, and then we worry about the rest later. It's like, so we took the email, we took the other thing, and this is important because it's also the reason why I really enjoy working with Bharat. Like this is like how you have the mafia say Cosa Nostra, right? This is our thing, but art doesn't extend to me and Bharat. It extends to everybody. Like the second we did this, we just wanted to have a space to for people to come with their comics. And it wasn't important that they even sold their comics. It was just a space to gather with your comics.
Yeah.
That was the key. So the thing I'll go back to this topic later, okay, about why the gathering is important. But it's a place to gather with your comics. So when the guys in Delhi asked us, "Can we do this?" We're like, "Yeah, dude, yeah, we'll give you the money. Don't worry about it." Because basically, the whole point is that this cost that we do is just a nominal charge. We don't care if you can't pay it. Just tell us, don't pay it. We don't care. It's fine. We'll arrange the money. Don't worry about it. But basically, we were so happy when the Delhi guys asked us about this, and we were like, "Yeah, do whatever you want. Do. We'll send you everything. Don't worry. You don't have to buy badges. You don't have to buy anything. We'll bring everything, or we just ship it to you." So you don't waste your money there. So the first Delhi Fest happened. That was great. I went there. I was so excited. And they did a kick-ass job. Like Delhi is like the enthusiasm all these guys have had. Lokesh, Shefali, what do you call it? Shivani, and what do you call all their friends and gang, right? The enthusiasm that Blue Jack all has had for this fest for 2 years in a row, then someone else took over, right? And basically, they've been sharing the enthusiasm and sharing the volunteers who join in also there. They're like, you want to run the fest, no problem, go take over. It's like, so they've really done a great job. Like in Bombay, what happens, it's mostly basically just a few of us doing it. And we don't care because it's like we've streamlined it. But Delhi was where the enthusiasm came up. Then basically Bangalore. These guys ran in Bangalore. Bangalore was great fun. I think the outdoor nature of Bangalore really made it for me. So the first time I visited Bangalore for the fest, I was like, wow, this is where we need to go, like outdoor spaces. But the key part is essentially this. It's that when we started the fest, it was just to gather together and basically just showcase comics, right? Selling was irrelevant because someone didn't want to sell. We told them you don't have to sell. You can just basically go ahead and exhibit your books. We had one of my close friends, Nitin. Nitin came with a book that he had done. He had drawn all the art for. Another friend of ours had done the what do you call it, text for it, the stories for it, and he just gave the book for free in 2017. It was great. He just kept giving books for free. Um, but now we move into like the territory of buy ICF, right? And this is the thing which I always try to explain to for Bharat and me. Basically, comics are a form of self-expression, which is why independent comics is so exciting. Is for a lot of people, it's basically like you're telling a story, yeah, but you're telling your story, great. But there's something about basically independent comics that changes from commercial comics or even basically audience driven comics like a lot of the like the Babysitter's Club, all scholastic stuff, all that stuff is written for an audience.
Correct.
But the stuff which you're doing, which is basically your independent comics, that is very idiosyncratic, that is important to you and no maybe nobody else in the world, right? And then what you're doing is you're coming to a festival to find an audience, and that is basically the thing that I think Bharat and I saw, at least at the start. It's that in the end, if you build a space that is reasonable for people to come to, like it's accessible, it's a regular thing. People will basically like they come with one book, two books, and they start expressing themselves through comics. You'll see more books. And that's basically like the crux of it.